Welcome to GrantChat Live, to our participants, and a very special welcome to Johna Rodgers. Thank you for being here, Johna.
Oh, thank you for having me. Just a fun morning talking to somebody I love to talk with.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you. Let's get started with this. So our topic today with Johna is skills or sorcery. Or is it sorcery or skills? That's the question. How do we gather information, critical information, quickly? And Johna has some shockingly simple ways to do that. So first, let's kick this off. We had our Twitter chat, and one of the things that you mentioned and that people really connected with was that emails and meetings are they're really the industry standard, but maybe they're not as productive as we'd like them to be. Can you tell me more about that?
Absolutely. And I hate to say I learned it the hard way. I learned it after doing it just that way for probably 10 or 15 years, I hate to say. So one of the biggest ways I learned it was through an entire year with the program funder, the program officer. Every time I would write her an email and I would ask her this really important question, and it would be what I would call a 2-hour email. You know, those you sit there, you don't want to say too much, you don't want to say too little, you really work on that email, and you read it 14 times. And I would hit send, and as soon as I hit send, she had no time to read it, my phone would ring. I would just put my hand on the phone because the phone's going to ring. And after a while, I figured out that her information style was not email. It just wasn't. She wanted that conversation. She wanted to be able to go over each point. And all the conversations, because I had angered her, or as I say in the grant world, I had pissed her off royally. When I did that to her, she would call me and for the next 20 minutes. And then I would talk her down off the ledge and she'd be fine.
Right.
Well, I started noticing that wasn't the only person that my emails were affecting that way. Unfortunately, my bosses did the same thing. They either ignored them or they got angry about them and would say, "Would you just come in here?" I'd be like, okay, what'd I do? This was a very clear email. It was perfect. I'm communicating. Well, here's the thing. If the other person doesn't read it and they don't understand it, you're not communicating. So then I said, okay, well, we have to meet every time. We just should meet. We should just schedule our lives to death and meet. Well, then everybody started hating my meetings. You know, it was like, we have to meet with Johna again. Okay, I got news for everybody. Nobody likes a meeting. Nobody. So I don't even have meetings anymore. I call them conversations. I would much rather just have a conversation with somebody. And it might be 15 minutes, it might be 5, it might be 45. But we're going to have chunks. Rarely ever do I have long meetings. They are short. And the reason is that I get rid of a lot of the fluff. And I think we'll talk about that through the morning. But I just find that people in meetings, first, you can't control it if you have too many people there. If you've got too many smart people, it's a train wreck. And I work with a lot of academicians, university people, high-level nonprofit leaders who don't have time for a lot of brainstorming. Yet I need their what do you want? So working in small groups rather than big groups, that's the best kind of conversations to have. Yeah, not meetings. No meetings.
I like me, probably everybody's nodding their heads in agreement and really relating to what you're saying about both emails. I've done that with emails where I think I'm being really clear, but the person on the other end does not find that clear. Or, like you said, they've misinterpreted something. Now we have to spend a lot of time backpedaling a little bit and saying, no, that's not what I meant, when we could have done that in a conversation much more quickly. So I love what you're saying. But also, meetings. Who likes meetings? Once in a while, working at home for me, having a face-to-face on a Zoom
Right.
call, having a meeting is helpful. But for the most part, it's not about the meetings, it's the socialization. So how are we being productive in meetings? What are the best ways to be productive? So, when we're looking at grant development and program design, I feel like we need a lot of input, right, to begin with. We need,
Yes.
community input. Our grant, our funders love that. Get that community input for your project. Show that you can do that you have that. You need to have those partners. You need to get that input. How do you take that when you have all of these folks participating in the program design and will ultimately participate in the grant? How do you take that and control it if you aren't having a lot of meetings or you're not having a lot of email? What do you do, especially as you get down to the wire? I find that really challenging to control. What do you do, Johna?
Well, I start off the very first thing with the RFP when I'm looking at the NOFO, the NIA, the RFP, the RFA, whatever you want to call the guidance, that document that guides our writing of the grant. I go look for the format, the criteria, the requirements, any priority points. What is it that's going to end up on the written page, either as the narrative or as the attachments, and I break those apart. Then those become my questions. Okay, so if it talks about what is the national significance of this work, well, heck, if I know, I don't know what the national significance is. It's not my project. And so every conversation we have, I'm taking those questions and kind of putting them in there. Either, and I keep a set, I'm looking on my desk. Here we go. This is the one I'm working on right now. So it's just a piece of paper. I've copied all the criteria onto it and then given myself space to take notes. So every time we have a meeting, something's going on this paper. Every time we talk about something, it's landing here. So then when I start, and I do this twice, I do this first in my own head. Okay, I do it first with me, and then second with other people as they add their thoughts. It helps me develop questions. And that's the difference between a meeting and a conversation. A conversation is more interview-like, where I'm just letting smart people talk. I find that smart people like to talk. You give them something to talk about, they're going to talk. And for some people, the cues for that conversation could be creating a timeline or writing a budget or talking about the number of staff we need to do this work. So you kind of learn what is that key thing that your boss wants to make sure happens? What is the key thing that your finance office needs? What is the key thing your SME, your subject matter experts, want to make sure in that proposal? And then you just build out from there. So each of the criteria help me focus the team. And I want to mention that team, it's going to come up more than once. I am so not a people person, but I always have a team. That's because it's, I said this yesterday, it's never my grant. It is always our grant, okay? Because I can do the greatest job in the world, but if the idea sucks, the grant will fail. It won't get funded, and if by some miracle it gets funded, it'll be terrible to operate. So I'm really focused on how do I guide the team in small groups, not big groups, small groups with my questions, quick conversations. Often I call people when they're commuting to or from work. Before we could do that, right? And because I'm a consultant now, I rarely see people in a face-to-face. It's almost always Zoom or phone. And I think those are more productive. We don't have to go get a soda. We don't have to take bio break. We just get to the meeting, right? So the criteria become the conversations. If I can't answer the criterion on my own, then I need that information from somewhere. And I start, having that conversation. The other thing is that sometimes I write for people who do things that I don't understand. I wrote a grant last year for a software development firm. I don't know nothing about that. I don't know nothing. So there was this, and I will never forget this. I was asking the owner of this company, major company, and they have multiple trademarked lines of code, okay, which is apparently something.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I said to him, so why isn't anybody else doing that? And he said, what? I said, well, I mean, it sounds like this is the way of the future. Why isn't anybody else writing and trademarking code like you are? And he said, because it's so effing hard, although he used the real word. I'm like, okay. And that became a line in my grant, not the effing part.
Right.
Yeah, okay. But writing original code is hard. Okay. My readers were also not coders, so they don't have a clue. And so I become that bridge between
Yes.
these little conversations and the reader. But to be that bridge, I have to know at least this much. And I find that if you're curious about their work, they will tell you about why that works or it doesn't work. So I'm not asking them to write the grant. I'm asking them to talk about the wonderfulness of what they do and how to save the turtles or the babies or whatever it is you're saving. Okay, so again, it's not that I need this information for my grant. No, I'm working on a grant, but this one little part that, wow, you could really help me on that. Tell me what that looks like in a classroom. Tell me what that looks like in the community. How would that work? How long does it take to do that? I mean, do you have to start only in November, or could we start it in March? What does that look like? And so I've just learned over the years to ask good questions, and sometimes that takes planning. Okay, sometimes good questions don't just come out of my mouth. Lots of times. So I keep lists of questions. Yesterday I had a conversation with the group, and let's see if I can get my light right. So you'll see on this side of the paper, there's a whole list of questions. This is what I wanted to learn from them yesterday. I went into that session going, I need to get this out of it. And I did. It was a good meeting. And we also, we scheduled an hour and we were out in 35. So that's always my goal.
Awesome.
Give them back some time.
That is
one
awesome.
other trick I do, because folks have no time. Nobody has time, and they especially don't have time for the grant writer, right? Nobody has time for the grant writer. So I might schedule 3 or 4 meetings in advance, and I always try to schedule one extra so that I can cancel it. Don't tell anybody.
Okay.
People love it when you cancel something, right? So it's like, yes, I don't have to go. Okay. So I try to pad that just a little bit so they get that I'm sincere, and that I'm not having a meeting just to have a meeting, right? Nobody likes a meeting.
That is awesome. So here are some of my little tidbits I got here, that that the criteria of the grant becomes a conversation. And for those of you that don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong, Johna was a journalist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those
time ago.
interview skills and those being, curious and bringing that to a question is incredible. An incredible skill that that can take us through that process and help everybody else through that process in a way that's more comfortable and not as tedious, and gets at the core of why they're doing it and how they're doing it. I love that, Johna. I love that. I love, tell me what that looks like. That was wonderful. Great tip. That bridge piece that I have bridge, convo, reader. That was my, and I drew a line, I drew a little bridge, but that you are that bridge. We as grant professionals are often the bridge between the project and often some real technical terms and jargon and stuff. And then that's jargon. And the reader, and like you said, sometimes the reader is in that jargony world. Sometimes that's who it is.
Yes.
And finding out who your reader is really important. And sometimes
Absolutely.
It's somebody like us that is really interested and curious about the project and how they're doing it, but we need real people language, right? So that I love that. So be curious, bridge the conversation, For the reader, good questions take planning. Good questions take planning. That is a nugget right there. You guys you need to put it on your wall, frame it in a nice font. Good questions take planning. And when you create a conversation instead of a meeting, I'm learning so much, John. I love this. Instead of a meeting, you are creating that conversation. You are being curious and you have those questions prepared so you can walk people through it. I love that. All right. So, again, we hear from a lot of our colleagues, and you touched on this, that requesting information may not be the highest priority for everybody else when it's our highest priority. And oftentimes we feel like our work and our contribution to the organization aren't valued, aren't understood. I like to say that people don't really understand that their jobs depend on our work, because oftentimes we're funding their future, right? We aren't funding their future. We're helping them get funding for their future and for the future of the organization. But right now, when they're thinking about a project a year from now, today's priorities are today's priorities, and it's really hard to get on their list, become the priority, and for our work to be valued. So how do you create that urgency for other people, especially those people that we depend on for data, budgets, financing, those kinds of things? What are some Johna magic tips that you have for that?
Well, a friend of mine once, years and years and years ago, said that, if you ask somebody, and we were talking about husbands and marriages and things like that, she said, if you ask him 3 times, that becomes nagging. Okay, so that's nagging. Nobody likes to be nagged. No. Okay, so I'm very conscious not to nag. So one of the things that I have always tried to set up is this anticipation among my clients and my colleagues. And by the way, guys, I'm in rural Kentucky, so if I start jerking on you, just don't take screenshots. That's just all I'm saying. Don't make me look more stupid than I do. So when I'm thinking about a project, I don't want to nag, but I want to create an expectation that there's certain things I need at certain times. And over the years, that's looked different. I'll find a new tool and we'll do it a different way. So I haven't done it the same way. But one of the staples for me, and my colleagues and bosses have really liked it, and my clients really, really like it, is a Gantt chart, a very simple Gantt chart that shows when the work starts, when the RFP comes out, and all the tasks that are involved. And over that 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 months. Now, I work mostly on federal, so it would look different for a 3-page foundation grant. Would look different. Doesn't mean you don't still need the information, but sometimes there's a lot more information involved in a 25 to 50 page federal proposal. So one of the things that I found really valuable about that is simply that people don't know what we do, and the amount of work that exists in what we do. So by listing in the Gantt chart the list of the tasks, and for larger projects, there could be 50 to 75 things that have to get done. And I will never forget, one of my bosses said, I like this. This is something I can look at and see where everybody is, because I would name the people who were helping me. So over on one side, there's a column that says, this is what I need from the boss. This is what I need from my reading specialist. This is what I need from my special education specialist. And they would have specific assignments. Now, Johna's the grant person. I'm going to do 85 to 90% of everything on that sheet. But they don't know that stuff exists. Okay. So, and this goes back to the problem of educating our bosses in our places of work. They can't see us think. They can't see us read. They can't see us research. They just think we're playing on the computer, right? So that's one way I can demonstrate to them all the stuff that's getting done, and how it progresses over the timeline of doing the grant. It also sets up for them an expectation that in 2.5 weeks, I really need to be at this point in the process, which means I need you to have done your piece way over here. Everybody on the team, and my teams are anywhere from 3 to 6 people, Depends on the client and how they want to do things. And I did it the same way when I was an employee. But my teams are all required to read the NOFO, the RFP. They're all required to do that. I don't think they do. And that's okay, because I'm going to have a conversation about it and we're going to go through it. So they're going to see the important parts. But, you know, they don't know that I have to download the package. I have to upload workspace. I have to do all these other tasks. I have to get signatures and partner letters and have conversation. So this is a way for them to get that. Also in my Gantt chart, I include the criteria. So each of the criteria bullets is one line in my Gantt chart, so that sometimes I'll assign that to someone. Sometimes, and it's their homework, okay? And I believe firmly in homework. This is, we are a little red hen making the bread. Everybody's going to participate. Some a little, some a lot. And again, Johna's responsible for all of it, but I have to have other people there. I'm not smart enough about what they do. I will tell you that when I first started working in education, I am not an educator. And I spent probably my first five or 7 years in education trying to get smart about education. And it finally dawned on me I would never be as smart as these men and women with masters and PhDs in education about education. Duh. I'm gonna. So I needed to get smarter about getting the information out of them. And that's when I turned to the tools and the skills and started working on me and not getting me smart on education, just on grants. So the Gantt chart's a big help. I also sometimes do a homework calendar. Okay, so this is you go to Microsoft Word, you download a calendar template, and you start putting in when you need things, like a letter from the community, or if you need a data analysis done, or if you need the budget from finance. Again, everybody's on the calendar, their names are on it, so they're sort of responsible. And then we just have check-ins. You know, if I'm in a physical office, I walk around and say, hey, just want to remind you, your finance piece is due to me on Friday. Just need 4 lines, all I need. Let me know if I can help you with that. And then if I don't get it by Friday, I show up on Friday and we do it together. And I sit down and I interrupt their day and we take care of it. Because my job is just as important. People are depending on me just like they are everybody else. And so if you don't have time for me, I will hunt you down. It's just and people begin to know that. So again, I take the nagging out of it. I make it more public. It's just an accountability. We're all in this together. And I am not shy about calling you as you're going to your car to get in to go pick up your kids from daycare. I'm going to call you. Hey, are you driving? Great. I just need 5 minutes. And I ask that 5-minute question. I'm okay to go get them a cup of coffee, bring it to them and say, hey, you got a second? And just have that meeting right there. And if I get stuck on something, especially because I don't always understand, have I mentioned that? I am just very humble and say, okay, I'm stuck. I've Googled, I have gone out to Wikipedia, I have done Google Scholar, I have tried to get really smart about this, and I think I can ask good questions now, but I still don't see it. And one of my favorite ones, when I do trainings on with folks, I talk about this. I finally just told one of my colleagues, I said, okay, I'm just dumb. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to dumb it down. I want you to pretend that it's your daughter who happened to be in the 4th grade, and this was about 4th grade. I want you to act like her and just show me what this means. And in 5 minutes, I had it. It was here, and I could write about it, but I just couldn't do it.
You touched on something that's really a lot of things that are really important. So I'm just writing like crazy over here. And one is that, we aren't the experts. Rarely are we an expert in a particular topic. I know I have a couple that I'm an expert in, but there's a lot of things I write about or that I help people with that I'm not an expert. And the same with you. You have some expertise in some areas, and all the grant professionals we know, they may have some expertise in one particular area, but that doesn't mean they can't write grants for anything. It is really key having that grant skill. Managing, it's project management. It's understanding how to interpret the NOFA and then how to interpret the language from whatever jargon we might be using in the project, and being able to talk about outputs and outcomes and what does that look like, and giving the funder, the reader, the visual with words, and then also being able to talk about, and this is how your investment in our program is going to make an impact. So I love that. And you have to, you, as the writer, you need to be able to distill that. You need to be able to showcase it, and that takes a certain set of skills that's our expertise. So we're there as their expert.
Exactly.
We don't have to be an expert in the topic. I love that. So, and I like the way you talked about, you go out and you do your homework first. You do the Google search, you do the Wikipedia, and then you come and let them know, here's what I know. And I still don't, it's not that you're dumb, it's that you don't have the knowledge, enough knowledge.
I have the background knowledge, the context.
Yeah. And then the context to understand, and then to, like I said, take that information and then talk about it in a way that somebody else is going to understand. So being, like you said, being humble, coming forward and saying, I've done the work and I need your expertise to show me what this looks like. It's key. And it does take both confidence and humility. You need to have the blend of those two things in order to move forward and to get the kind of clarity that you need. So that touches on something that I wanted to ask you about, which is saving other people time. And you've touched on this in a couple of different ways. I mean, I can see how this works, but I know that that's one of your priorities, that you don't want to waste people's time. You don't want to take a lot of their time, because when you ask them to give you something, you want to get it. So how do you save bosses and colleagues time? What are some of your tricks to help save them time?
Well, and that is very, I can't even tell you how important that is, because if we become, I don't want to use the word pest again, but if we become these people who are sucking time away from other important things, then we are no longer a benefit. There is a balance there. There is a balance. And that's part of why I do use a team approach, is to try to make sure that I'm getting multiple perspectives, but also timely information, and not sitting in the boss's office for 3 hours trying to put that information into my brain. That's not, he or she doesn't want me to do that. There have to be other ways to do it. So the preparation helps. Reading up on the area of work we're going to be working on. I try to get as smart about that as I can in a very short amount of time, enough for a dinner party. I'm great at a dinner party. Just ask me anything. I know this much about lots of stuff. The other ways are, again, trying to talk with them when they need me, when they are available. I do not do long emails. I try my best not to. Every now and then there's a long email, but I try my best not to. But the subject line, I will often have basically the question I need to ask in the subject line. And then I'll just put just a note or two, hey, tell me when I can pop in or when we can have a phone call. It was interesting yesterday during GrantChat, someone noted, well, I never look at the subject line. Well, the first paragraph should also give you that hint, should tell you what it is I'm needing. And with all of my clients and colleagues, I have learned over the years how they like to communicate. Yes. I have one client, they are all text all the time. Well, then it doesn't do me any good to send them an email. So if I need to send them an attachment or something like that, I'll text them and say, hey, just worked on this, just send it to your email, so they know it's coming. When that first happened a few years ago, that drove me absolutely stark raving mad. It was like, really, text, professional people don't do text? It's like, okay, well, I had to get over that and get over myself, as I do on many occasions. So I try to find what they like best. And a lot of times it's a conversation. I also have a client that talks faster than I do. So a conversation with her is hard. I'm like trying to take all these notes and I can't do it. So, she knows I'm going to record her. She knows that up front. I'm going to record it so that I can listen more deeply later. And that helps me to, again, have more of a conversation rather than a meeting. We're just chatting. Yes. Okay? Another way, and this is an evolving area, again, because clients are different, people are different, colleagues are different. But over the last few weeks with all that we're going through right now, one of the new strategies that's come to bear, I'll credit one of my clients on this, is because we're all lonesome. I'm absolutely positive they've done this because we're all lonesome and we get on Zoom and we want to start talking. No, bosses don't have time for that. Get to the point, okay? So they have started, and I've kind of picked up on this. I'm liking it. They do 2 questions for everybody at the beginning. One is a check-in. How you doing? How are you? How's your mental capacity? How's your fog going? Is everything okay at the house? And the second one, which is the time saver. Well, both of them are time savers. The second one is, what do you want to get out of this phone call? Mm-hmm. I love that. Okay, what are you expecting to learn today while you're doing that work? And then at the end, there's okay, what do we still need to do? And everybody gets that final check-in. Okay, so I think that's really productive. And so every time I'm on the call with them, I know there's going to be a check-in. I don't have to just start talking about, what happened in my world today. They're going to ask me. I'm going to get to have my 30 seconds, And I think it helps them be personable, yes. But still get back to their work. And that's what we want to do. Everyone is zoomed out right now. I got to tell you, there are some points where if I have to jump on another Zoom, okay. On the other hand, I've had a shower this is the 3rd day, 3 days in a row. This is awesome. Okay. So my husband, bless his heart, who I'm sheltering in place with, he goes, oh, it must be a Zoom day. Yeah, it's a Zoom day. Okay. Gonna be on Zoom all day.
Exactly.
So it's just something you learn with people. If they're not responding to your email, that's because one of 2 things. Well, one of 3 things. Number 1, either they're intentionally ignoring you. It's probably not that, but it could be. Number 2, they don't have time for you. Yeah. Probably that. Or number 3, maybe they've saved it and they'll get back to it, but they'll forget. Now, I happen to be one of those. I often will say, okay, I'm going to wait and do this in the morning. And I'll snooze it. Gmail has a great snooze effect now, and it pops it back up. That saves me. Also, my new smartwatch has Alexa, and I can say, hey, remind me to call so-and-so tomorrow, so that it pops up. So I'm just learning to use the tools I have to put it back in front of me. But, not everybody does that. So I try not to take it personally, and I do one of my pop-in tricks or a quick phone call and say, hey, just wanted to put this back in front of you. You got 5 minutes today. I don't ask for a meeting. Right. 5 minutes.
Right. That's awesome. That is awesome.
Yep.
We do have a question from Vicki, and she says that she finds that many clients have difficulty developing the work plan. And can you talk a little bit more? I know that this isn't about the work plan, but maybe getting the information and time saving and helping to focus those folks and distill down to what she says is a granular level for the work plan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's a great question, and it's absolutely on point. Any of the pieces of the grant, the timeline, the logic model, the work plan, any of those things that are larger components, and I've done it many different ways. I have clients who want to do their own work plan, and maybe I'm along for the ride. I have clients who don't know what a work plan is. And so let's take the latter one. So when you take I create a template. And maybe we'll have a conversation about what goes where. And we'll work through what I call just the ledger. What's going to happen in the work plan, more like a timeline. And then I'll flesh it out. And if some of it's wrong, we'll fix it. In fact, I expect it to be wrong. And I tell my clients this. If I send you this thing that we've sort of started together, but now I've kind of gotten it to the first draft stage, you understand that you are liable for this. I don't do this work plan, you do. You better read it. And if it doesn't have any changes in it, when it comes back to me, I'm going to assume you didn't read it. I'm going to assume you didn't, because I expect there to be things wrong. And I hope I scare them so they'll read it. I want to make sure that, because if I say they're going to do XYZ 3 times each year, they're about to be liable for that if they win the award. And I don't want them to be upset and go, why the heck did we say 3 times? Well, because Johna used her experience in writing good grants to kind of figure that out. 3 times sounds better than 2 times. It's not as much as 6 times. And so that sounds appropriate. I'll give you an exact example, a really on-point example. We had the client said, well, we're going to do 60 site visits over 2.5 years. 60 site visits. And I started thinking, oh my goodness, these are national, okay, not local, national site visits, 60 of them. How are you going to manage that? And so I had to do a spreadsheet. So I got a spreadsheet out and I said, okay, they're going to start in the middle of the first year and you have 2 staff people who are doing that. Well, that made it more doable. Okay, so now each person's going to do 30 site visits and it's going to be spread out over 24, 30 months. Wow. Okay, it's a site visit or 2 every month. That's doable. Okay, but I also felt really strongly that I needed to tell the reader that. Okay, because otherwise it looks untenable. It looks undoable. And one thing about a work plan is that it's doable. Okay, you can't just throw some number in there. The same thing with your goals and objectives. You can't just throw a number in there. It has to be doable. It has to be practical and reasonable. So I'm always pushing back on that, saying, how are you gonna do that? So if I see something that doesn't look logical, I'm gonna push. I'm gonna push hard on that. If I put something in and I'm like, I'm not sure this is right, we're gonna have that discussion too. So work plans are a great tool, but the applicant is actually liable for that work, and you need to make sure they're on board with anything you intuit.
Right. So we have a follow-up question, and it's a great follow-up question, and I know you're gonna love this. So Vicki says, after using your tips and the client still has difficulty developing the work plan, is it because they might not be a good candidate for the grant and they're going outside of their mission? Is that possible?
Oh, yes. And I've had experience with that too. You know, when sometimes our bosses, as much as we love them, our clients, they chase money and not the right appropriate work. So yes, absolutely. But it also could just be that they don't have the right partner at the table. Sometimes people need somebody else to come in and help them with the piece. For example, I have lots of educational think tank type clients. Well, they're wonderful at what they do, but sometimes they need a university to come in. I mean, they just need somebody with some research skills, some statistical analysis. So sometimes it's just that, and we need to bring in somebody. So that's one of the things we have that conversation about very early is, can you actually do all of this work? But you're absolutely right. It shows up when you go to do that logic model or work plan, when you're doing that timeline, trying to figure out the specifics of how something works. It also shows up in your team. So for example, the boss or the client, the lead person may say, oh, we want to do this many of this, and we're going to go out into the community and we're going to do dot, 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 dot. And then you talk to someone else on your team, and they go, oh, that's not possible. We can't. Well, the truth is usually somewhere in between the vision of the boss and the practicality of the employee or subject matter expert. It's somewhere in between. And so again, that's where we kind of bridge that and have that meeting of minds there to say, well, okay, what is visionary and practical? What are the two things, and how do we merge those? But yes, I think people often overestimate their eligibility, or not, that's the wrong word. They're probably eligible, but their appropriateness for a project based on the fact that it's a lot of money. And well, sure, we can get that. No. And so often I'll go back and say, okay, I'm going to start this work plan. This work plan is going to take me 15 to 20 hours. Okay, 15 to 20 hours if it's a big work plan. And as I get into it, I want you to think about that, because somebody's paying me. I know employees, you feel like you're free. You're not free. Somebody's still paying you. Okay. So this is that opportunity cost. What could you be working on if you weren't working on this ridiculous project? Okay.
Exactly.
And that's a conversation with the boss. I will say I lost most of those battles and, wrote it anyway. You know, I did the very best I could. And I will say on all of those, we were not funded. Right. Where it was pretty obvious to me we were chasing money. So just, they have to learn that lesson.
So Vicki, we both hear you. We hear what you're saying about, they're moving down a path, and you can see, I think what you're saying is you can see that maybe they don't have the capacity. Maybe they don't have the internal capacity, and they could get a partner to come in. Maybe they are going down the wrong track and having that mission drift.
Yep.
And, that's part of our job. Sometimes our biggest job is to say no. Right, Johna?
Yep.
Sometimes
That's
our biggest
exactly
job is
right.
to say no.
And I will tell you that my clients and my bosses all have loved me 80% of the time.
Yep.
And the other part of the time I'm saying, no, this is what it's looking for. And then I go back again to the RFP and say, or the guidance, and say, okay, this is kind of who they're looking for. But the one that really is telling is this is who got funded last year.
Yes.
Do you look like these people? Okay?
Yes.
If you don't look like these people, then you may not be the right applicant. And that's pretty powerful. And you can figure that out either if it's federal or state through the last year's federal state applications. Also, the 990 form will tell you who got funded on the foundation side. And that's really telling. If you're a Boys and Girls Club and this foundation has never, ever funded a Boys and Girls Club before, do you really think you're so special that you can get that funding? Think about that. Are you that special that you'd be the first ever Boys and Girls Club? If they're in your hometown, maybe. If not, yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, and that's going and talking to the funder. That's looking at, a ton of other things to be able to tell the boss or your client whether or not the points are kind of in their favor. Is the grant in their favor? So excellent question. Really good tips, Johna. Vicki says thank you very much for addressing the work plan issue. I think it's time for some little nitty-gritty talk. Not that Johna isn't always in the nitty-gritty talk, but let's talk about finance real quick. It's kind of a little more of a thorn maybe than some of the other issues that we have in getting information. So getting budget and finance information seems to be one of the greatest grant application challenges for most grant professionals, both for applications and even for reports sometimes. So how do you keep things moving forward with that critical financial information and budget information, particularly when we have to get it in a grant format where we're trying to look at the future position, salaries, those kinds of things? How do we get that when we need it and we're not getting the response that we need? How do we build that kind of pathway to information?
Well, and that's such a great question. And I run into, folks along the way who don't have access to the information, which first is just mind-boggling to me. Because how could you not have the information? And yeah, I can remember early days when I was writing, and I would have to just email finance and say, I need a salary for a person with 5 years experience who has a master's degree, and they would send me that in the fringe, and okay, I can work with that. The rest of the budget I can build out, and I found out really early in my work when I was working at my co-op, and I was there for almost 15 years. The best way for me to get stuff from them was to do it, have them push back on it, put it in a format they like, be consistent with my format. I never make them learn a different form. For example, the state form in Kentucky is very different from the federal form. So I would still do the budget in the federal format because my office liked it that way.
Yes.
And I just learned how to bring it to them in a format they liked. And then we would talk through some of the numbers. And again, on my Gantt chart where I'm planning it out, I'm going to have somebody from finance at the table with me, someone who can go through the practical. We also, at my co-op, my educational service agency, when I was working there, we always had someone who was like the kind of the COO, the operational person, and they would be at the table with me as well. I also found, and this was wonderful. I'll call her Christina. And Christina loves budgets, and she works in finance, but she loves looking at the big picture. So the week before the budget is due, I would just take it into her and say, Christina, do you have time to look over my budget for me? And she would take her bloody red pen, just like I do with narratives I'm reading, and she would go through and to the penny make sure everything was lined up. It was awesome. And for her, it was fun because she's just that kind of person.
Yeah.
I know. And for me, no. I just want to make sure the words are right and there's numbers, So just various tricks. I also am really hip to do donuts or muffins or cookies or cakes or whatever it takes to make sure I'm in there with finance. Now, here's the problem. Finance talks funny. They don't talk the same language we do. And so again, that humility and professionalism both come into play here. Being able to say, here's what we have to provide. I need to provide this level of detail. I need to know what mileage is going to be this year. I need to know all these little things that go into there. I'm totally happy to go out and find out, we need to purchase curriculum. Okay, fine. I'll go to the vendor. I'll figure out what the curriculum is. I'll have a number. It'll be great. I'll describe it. But I can't do salary without finance. Okay, I can't do that. So I always put in a placeholder, and then I get them to go back through and say, okay, can you adjust this for me? Right. And I don't do it once. I do it at each draft. And there's usually 3 drafts of the budget for me. There's the first one in the first few weeks of the grant, because when you work with lots of partners and when you work with school districts, everything changes and everybody wants to have this much money. And you're like, okay, it's okay. So we have to figure it out. I know that it's going to cost our agency this much to do the project. But I don't know if that means we have 5 school districts or 50 school districts. And so we have to play that kind of Russian roulette and figure out where we're going to land. We do that very early in the process before we get everybody's hopes up. Then we do it again a second time. And then that more final draft, we really are sitting down and having a brief conversation over the line items. And that conversation is brief only because I'm expecting them to have read the budget before we get to the conversation. We just want to talk about hotspots. Yeah.
Hotspots. I love that. So I loved your Christina. We all have our Christinas, and finding your Christinas for budgets, for project design, those people that can just dig in and they love it. They love being a part of the team. They love that part of looking at the grant proposal or the work plan. They are the unsung heroes of the grant world, aren't they? So
they are.
I love, again, so many notes. So we have a lot of nuggets of information. I'm going to have to put these in some bullet points and stuff and talk to you a little bit more about, like, maybe we can have something where people have a little checklist on, tips. Your shockingly simple tips. We'll just have a shockingly simple tips checklist. But that on the work plan piece of it too, we were talking about this, and I think it also goes along with finance, having that vision. What's the vision and what's the capacity? That financial capacity oftentimes is very limiting as far as what we can do. What can we really, really do with the money that we're receiving and with the staff capacity, with the things that we have planned? Sometimes we don't know about that. I've had a situation where the organization was planning on shutting down a program and the program was still applying for grants. When I went to finance, even though the executive director had checked off on them applying for a grant because he didn't want to tell them, and I said to finance, what's the 3-year budget? So, you can run into some really difficult situations, but making sure that you're touching all of those places. Ultimately, we were able to save the program because we had a grant, so that was good. But there was a complete lack of communication, and
Yep.
oftentimes, like you're saying, you're connecting all of these dots within the organization, making sure that everybody's on board, getting the vision, getting the capacity, and looking at the financial piece. And sometimes we're the one person in the organization that's talking to all of those folks and getting a clearer picture of what the future looks like for the organization.
Yep.
And that can be a gift to the organization. So I'm trying to think if I missed anything. I wanted to pull things out. I loved your criteria bullets and having that checklist. I love being an expert on the grant and not necessarily the topic. I think sometimes grant professionals, I've seen where folks are looking for a grant. They're looking for a grant writer and a grant writer that knows this particular topic.
Yeah.
And what do you say to those organizations that are looking for that grant professional? And this is my last real question, for that grant professional that has to be an expert in that particular topic.
God bless you. Because that's harder to find. That's just really harder to find. Now you see that in academia, right? You especially if it's in a science area or medical, where there's a lot of jargon, there are a lot of specific terms, and I get that.
Yes.
I know, our mutual friend Jay Jansen, who does rural hospitals. That's great. He's got a kind of background in that. He knows some stuff about it. That's awesome. But if he has a client who wants to write for the safer grants for fire departments, then it's a little more challenging, right? So I say pick your lane. If you feel you really need that, okay, but it can work the other way as well. It's just different. And one of the big things I know about organizations and how they use their grant folks is that they're often very different. They just are.
Yes.
And I try to go with the flow. I'm also a very because now I'm a consultant. One of the things that I know is when I don't know enough.
Yes.
Sometimes I know that it will take me longer to get up to speed. For a one-time grant, I'm probably not going to do an SBA grant right now.
Right.
Okay. There are so many people who know how to do that. I'm probably going to try to find a friend, a colleague out there who knows how to do it and hand that off, because it's better for the potential client. Then the next time they'll come back to me and remember, oh, she was so nice about that, and that really worked out well. I might work with them on something else. So it can go either way.
I love that. And, Johna, we have a network of grant professionals and grant consultants that I know you and I both tap into. And knowing what other folks' expertise may be and what grants they have worked on. I get emails all the time. Somebody will just blast an email out to like 30 grant professionals they know that are grant consultants and be like, who's done this? And they're just going to hand it off to you and introduce you to the client, or they're going to subcontract with you because that's their client. They have a retainer with that client, but they need your expertise, so they're going to subcontract with you. And just knowing what you know, knowing what you don't know. And I think that's part of growing in the profession. It's part of your professional development, knowing your lane, but also knowing that you can veer out of your lane. And especially if you get a co-pilot, if you get somebody that already knows the area and can show you the how to get there and navigate for you, you can do it together. So I think there's a lot of creative ways to come at things. And there are grants that do require specific expertise. There are grants that you don't necessarily have to have that expertise, but if you have it, you're going to compete. You're going to be able to be more competitive. So it's a balance. Being able to talk to a client about that is also another skill set, and the way that you describe that is perfect. You're not giving away the work, and I think sometimes grant professionals, especially the consultants, might have a sense of scarcity that if I turn this work down, they're not going to come back to me, and that's not necessarily the case. The other thing is that consultant that you refer to, or 3 or 4 that you refer to, they're going to do the same for you. We're all in this together. Right. We are all in this together. And we want everyone to succeed. So speaking of which, thank you very much for being here, being with the GrantChat community. Thank you for always giving to our profession and for all you do for your clients, for your communities that you serve, and for our GrantChat community. I just love you, Johna. Thank you very much.
Love you too.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Thank you for your questions. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Vicki. Thank you, everybody else that was here. We really appreciate you.